Our trees are burning. 350 million hectares burn each year. That's the entire country of India covered with trees burnt. Our air is growing toxic. 8 million people die every year from pollution. That's more than tuberculosis, malaria, HIV combined. Our forests are disappearing. Each decade, we're losing 100 million hectares of forests. That's an entire Colombia of forests just disappearing. These challenges, they're as diverse as they are daunting. But I have hope. My hope comes from the fact that all of these challenges are unified by one thing tying them all together. People are causing this, but people's behavior is what can solve it. For every one of those challenges, we need somebody, somewhere, to do something different. And the behavioral and social sciences are telling us about that motivation. You know, a few weeks ago, I was talking to someone who's worked in conservation for decades. And he was reflecting on the fact that he's worked with a lot of scientists in his day. They've been experts in every species you can think of under the sun. But he was reflecting on the fact that there's really just one species that we need to understand to solve all of those challenges. And that species is Homo sapien. We need to know why we do what we do. And the behavioral and social sciences are, at their core, fundamentally answering that question. Why is it we do what we do? Whether that's from the perspective of what's going on in our head, to this perspective of the social structures around us that lead us to act in the way that we do, they're answering this question, why do we do what we do? The environmental space may not have always seen itself as being sort of in the behavior change game, but they always have been. When you think about what the environmental space has been doing, we've been trying to shift people's behaviors. We've just been using a limited and impoverished toolkit. We've been offering material incentives for people to change. Why do we offer material incentives? We're trying to get them to change. Why do we offer people information? We're hoping that that information changes their behavior. Why do we pass a regulation? We pass a regulation in order to shift somebody's behavior. These are all levers of behavior change that have been traditionally used by the environmental space. But they are incomplete. When you just use material incentives, you can see a backfire where you crowd out people's pro-social motivations. One of perhaps the biggest truisms in behavioral science is that just piling on information doesn't tend to actually lead to shifts in behavior. And recent research has found that just passing regulations, when they're out of step with local norms, very rarely actually leads to the change that was envisioned in the language of those rules. Now, hear me clearly, I am not saying that these are irrelevant tools. What I'm telling you is that they are an incomplete toolkit for us to actually drive behavior change. And the social and behavioral sciences are what fills in the rest of this overall map of the levers available to us. Those sciences help us understand how people are influenced by the behaviors that they see around them and socially influenced by the expectations of others. That behavioral and social sciences tells us that oftentimes when we're making decisions, we're not making some cool numeric calculus. we're driven by how the different options make us feel, our emotional connection with those choices. That research has shown us that it's not only the options that are presented to us, as is often assumed in rational models, but also the architecture around that choice. All that other context informs our preferences over the same two options. Now, I want you to hear that this is not simply about nudging people. Nudging is an important technique for moving people to adopt new behaviors, but it involves just these light changes to their environment, and it's an important part of the toolkit. But this is just as relevant when you're trying to change people's livelihoods in deep multi-year engagements. It's the same set of insights, because fundamentally what we're asking is, why do we do what we do? And when you take this complete toolkit to bear on the question of why do we end up in these environmental catastrophes that I described before, they give you the opportunity to drive change in those situations. So when we think about environmental challenges, we oftentimes think of those desolate landscapes that I showed you earlier. But that's not what I think about, because I have hope. I think about all the work that's being done to apply those levers to change farming behavior to prevent forest fires. I think about all the work that's being done to apply those levers to encourage the adoption of rooftop solar to reduce pollution. I have hope because I think of all the work that's being done applying those levers to plant mangrove forests to fight deforestation. These are the reasons that I have hope. These are the things that I see in my mind when I think of those environmental challenges we saw earlier. And I'm excited to share with you this session that we have here today, because this session is the kind of stuff that gives me hope. This session is going to share with you others' experiences of applying behavioral and social science to drive real change in the world and reflect on their experiences for that change.